The next item on the agenda is our public comment, and these comments are limited to agenda items number 1026, 1027, 1028, 1029, and 1030 that the Authority Board will consider following the public comments. The total time that is fixed for public comments is 1 hour. You're limited your time to a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker, and I would ask that you adhere to that. Jenny will keep the time, and she will announce the names of the speakers in the order that they've registered. I think we have about 24 registered. We're probably not going to have time to hear all those, and that's one reason I'd like for you to be sure and limit your time to 5 minutes so that we can hear as many as possible. Please address your comments and remarks to the Authority Board as a whole and not to any individual board member or member of the Authority staff. Finally, this agenda item is for public comment only, so no questions will be asked of the board, and please understand the board will not engage in any discussion with you on any remark you may have. And thank you all for your patience as we get to this part of our agenda. Happy New Year to each of you. I hope you have a great 2023, and thank you for being patient with us. When I talk about the public comments, please understand that we as a board will act professionally. I expect each speaker and each guest that we have here today to act professionally. There is a law against interrupting public meetings. We have highway patrol here. We don't want to have to ask anybody to leave. So please conduct yourself in a professional manner, and we will do the same. Jenny, would you call the first speaker?
Yes. The first person on the list is Dave Moore.
Imagine that you and your family are sitting around your living room one evening and strangers break in and announce they're going to rob you. They're going to take everything that is precious to you. Would you just sit there and watch? Would you be respectful and courteous and even offer to help them haul away your property? I submit to you that you would not. If you're like most people, you might get a little upset. You might say, "Stop, you can't do that. You stop now." Depending on how you judge the robber's defensive capabilities, you might even try to fight them. Most folks would not, however, just sit passively by and allow themselves to be robbed. They would do something to resist. I believe it's important for you, the OTA board, to realize that how you are perceived out here in the real world. You know right up front that most regular folks in Oklahoma hate toll roads, right? I mean, you have to know that. This is not news. But when it comes to the proposed toll roads you seek to build in Cleveland County, it's worse. It's much worse. It seems, though, that the board and the lieutenants and the captains that you send out to actually do the toll road dirty work, the Gatzes, the Achilles, the Strebs, it seems you have all trained yourselves to wall off your hearts and true feelings to the point that you are incapable of having true empathy and compassion for the people you hurt. Any advertising executive will tell you that perception is everything, and in this situation, the perception is not good. In fact, how you and the OTA are perceived is very, very bad, not just by the people whose homes are directly threatened, but by all Oklahomans who have given even a cursory look at how things are really playing out. The deep hurt, the grief, the fear, the extreme sorrow, the pain and resentment felt by your potential toll road victims is stunning. It is real, and it is deserved, because you have allowed yourselves and your employees to be perceived as bullies who simply do not care what happens to those not in their inner circle. Because of the perception that you have promulgated, you are in the middle of the biggest public relations disaster of your careers. Those are the facts. Is it really what you want? Is this what you were going for? A public relations nightmare? The only question left is, are you going to try to salvage whatever might be left of any credibility you may have had before? I was there in 1999 when Neil McCaleb, who was the head of ODOT, the head of OTA, and the Oklahoma Secretary of Transportation, issued a press release addressing routes almost identical to those that confront us today, the same routes. Secretary McCaleb stated, "The people of Central Oklahoma have spoken, and we have listened," as he announced indefinite discontinuation of those routes. Secretary McCaleb declared those routes dead. And if you want to put a stop to the biggest public relations catastrophe of your careers, you will do the same. I urge you to stand up to the phony con artist pseudo-developers trying to run this state and declare those proposed toll roads dead. God help us. And I got to go. Thank you.
The next person on the list is Sean Shingledecker. No, okay. We'll go on to the next name is Stan Ward.
Good morning. It's with some degree of trepidation that I come here this morning. 2 years ago, I tried to retire after 55 years of practicing law. I thought maybe it was time for the old horse to go back to the barn, or at least to the pasture. Well, I had a few years left. Then I woke up one morning, February the 23rd, 2022, and it had 8001 East Etowah Road as the proposed route for a massive interchange on this new toll road in Cleveland County. That happens to have been my address for 42 years. That's where my house, my barns, my guest house, and other things are located. It had an impact on me, but not nearly the impact that it had on my wife, who is unfortunately my age. And we thought that the last few years were going to be relatively quiet. But the Turnpike has created a maelstrom of activity. Litigation is expensive. I've been a litigator for all of my career. I know how expensive it is. The people that are impacted didn't have the money to go and pay them like you guys do. So they have to go to the old broken horse and see if he'll carry the ball. And that's exactly what we've been trying to do. We've also given you an opportunity, quite frankly, to put an eraser on your pencil. We ask you not to take this action to pay the money, $42 million that you already paid as of November 30 to a bunch of these people over here, the engineers, the surveyors, the contractors, and all these people that seem to do right well from the construction of turnpikes. Rather than do that, you've doubled down. I just heard what you said when you walked out here today, that you're thinking about an appeal. Well, we're going to have to file another suit, a key tam lawsuit, against the individuals who make this decision not to repay the money, and against the individuals who receive the money. Not something we want to do, but we're being compelled to do it. And once again, we're doing it because everyone that's involved is upset about a process. we were the last people to know of your plan, not the first. When you were going to roll out Access Oklahoma, what did you do? You told the contractors, you told the city officials that you thought would be on your team, and you brought them all aboard. And then the last to know were the people whose properties were going to be taken. We have heard these new words from your publicist. You want to be transparent, and you want to follow due process. Well, I see two lawyers sitting up here, and both of you are very familiar with those two concepts. And in order to have due process, there has to be a notice and an opportunity to be heard before a fair and impartial hearing body. And that's why we came here today, is basically to say, think about this before you act. Give us the opportunity to make our case. Don't foreclose us. Don't shut the door. Hear our side of the story, like Ralph Harvey said, now for the other side of the story. We would like to present our other side of the story using some professional people to tell you why we think that this is not a good project, and it's a project that's only going to create animus, as Mr. Moore said, and more animus for you. I think you're making a huge mistake. You can rectify it. It's not too late. We're holding out the peace pipe, but it looks to me like you broke off the stem this morning. I'm sorry to hear that, but that appears to be the decision that you've made. But I do appreciate the opportunity to address you. And I appreciated the opportunity to meet you, Mr. Chairman. I thought you were a perfect gentleman, and you should be proud of this man because he did conduct himself most appropriately and in the best tradition of your board. Thank you.
Next on the list is Rashard Tortorello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, authority members, Secretary Gatz, Joe Kelly. I'm Councilman Tortorello, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Norman's largest ward and its citizens significantly impacted by this turnpike. Many have suffered great angst since the 22 February Access Oklahoma announcement. My citizens feel their lives have been put on hold, their livelihoods in jeopardy, and they have a sense of powerlessness living under the threat of eminent domain. This is a huge story today, what's happening here, but the bigger story and the bigger point is that the state is trampling on private property rights. It may not seem so, but your actions today will resonate with every registered voter in Oklahoma. Let's not deceive ourselves. Thousands of my citizens, and many thousands more across this great state, will know their government does not care about their well-being. Many feel this approach only further negates the legitimate concerns and interests of affected property owners and highlights a disconnect between the authority and community needs. I'm asking for the board to slow this process down and bring all parties to the table for common sense dialogue. This is the American way. Otherwise, tomorrow's headlines might say that a turnpike is more important than grandma, when it could actually say that OTA commits to have an open dialogue with those directly affected by the turnpike. I think that sounds a lot better. Eminent domain is a controversial and powerful tool that carries the potential for profound effects on affected citizens. A core associated principle is that representatives and decision makers should take greater care when considering its applications. Open communication channels to ensure that enough information is screened so that informed policies can be created and tailored to fit the needs of the community better than a one-size-fits-all solution would. As an elected official tasked with representing thousands of residents, I strongly urge this board to consider these views as part of your process, giving the people a voice regarding this critical matter. It is a natural state of man to protect their legacy for future generations. The preservation of individual rights is a fundamental responsibility of the government. This is a central theme championed by natural right philosophers such as John Locke and Thomas Jefferson, who saw it as an imperative duty to protect citizens through laws that guaranteed their privileges to be secured, including private property rights. Thomas Jefferson articulated this notion in the Declaration of Independence, affirming the government's role in preserving the people's civil liberties. He stated, "Government must serve and secure citizens' basic rights and freedoms. This is integral for any just society to prosper and reach its highest potential." He also encapsulated that what it would mean to strive towards such a society without fail or compromise, a task that still stands firmly in place today. The Open Meetings Act of 1977 requires public officials to conduct their business openly and transparently, granting citizens the opportunity for due diligence. In doing so, it promotes trustworthiness between government entities and members of our society, laying down a foundation that allows all of us to enjoy peace of mind when vital decisions are being made on behalf of the people. The government has a powerful tool, an unyielding tool in eminent domain. I'm here on behalf of Norman to ask for a shift. Allow those most affected by such decisions to have their voices heard. With dialogue between all parties involved, what do you have to lose? With transparency comes greater trust between citizens and their government, leading us towards certainty with every action taken. I'd like to leave you with a final thought. The right to life is the source of all rights, and the right to property is their only implementation. Without property rights, no other rights are possible. Property rights are the keystone of a functioning society. Without them, no other right can be protected. Owning and preserving one's belonging is essential to experiencing life truly. Thank you.
Next person on the list is Tassie Hirschfeld.
Thank you so much for allowing public comment at your meeting. As some of you may know, I'm the lead plaintiff on the Open Meetings lawsuit, and I was actually sitting in the back of the room during the depositions. You may not have seen me, Mr. Love, as I believe you were in video, but I was off in the corner. And so I'd like to start by thanking you. I know we were not supposed to mention specific individuals, but I would say at least one of you struck me as a person of tremendous integrity and honesty, and that was very meaningful, and I feel hopeful about this process, so thank you for that. So I would like to go back to those depositions for a moment, because one of the more surprising facts for me that came out of that was learning that you, the board members, unanimously agreed that you learned about Access Oklahoma on February 22nd or immediately before. I think all of us were a bit shocked to learn that. But in going through the documents, and again, I pulled this off the OTA website, like this is the original press release, and the headline is February 22nd, officials unveil first look at Access Oklahoma Turnpike plan. So why is this important? Why am I taking you back to that day, February 22nd? Because in today's agenda, I saw that the OTA has a resolution that claims that Access Oklahoma was introduced at the December 7th board meeting. And in fact, here's a quote. The resolution goes on to state, quote, some residents of Cleveland County claimed to be surprised when they learned about the proposed turnpikes in February. The statement implies that certain residents of Cleveland County, of which I am one, would have known about Access if we had been paying attention in December. But if you, the board members, only found out in February, how is that even possible? This may seem like a small issue, a small technicality, but it isn't. The Oklahoma Turnpike Authority executives are lying to you in the same way that they lied to us in the community. They have misrepresented every aspect of this. They have refused to answer questions at public meetings, and they have changed their story multiple times. We do not have confidence in them. We have some confidence in you as people of integrity who will step up and demand that this organization speak the truth to you, to me, and to everyone who is affected by these plans. $5 billion is 50% of the state budget of Oklahoma. It is an enormous amount of money to be in the hands of unelected people who are not honest. And so I would implore you going forward to demand honesty and accountability, to understand that those of us in the community are not hateful people who, are just determined to hug trees no matter what. We care about our homes, we care about our property, and we care about our state government. And what we see happening here is not good government. What we have is a group that is not accountable to anyone, that has the power of eminent domain and feels it is entitled to $5 billion of borrowed money to build turnpikes for which there have been no studies, no environmental studies, no impact studies that will endanger the water supply for 3 cities. So going forward, I would encourage you to put these resolutions, or the ratification of these payments aside until at least the state Supreme Court is resolved and we can work through some of these issues together. Thank you.
Next on the list, Amy Serrato.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's nice to see you. Happy New Year. My name is Amy Serrato. I'm a resident of Norman. I'm a professional civil engineer, and I'm also a potential turnpike victim. We've met before, and when I spoke up to you about why the proposed toll routes in Cleveland County made no sense, I thought my engineering and environmental arguments might be persuasive because in my life, facts matter, but now I know better. Now I understand that the proposed turnpikes have nothing to do with traffic engineering. They have nothing to do with relieving imaginary and inflated traffic congestion or overstated safety concerns. Instead, we've come to find out that they have everything to do with money and deceptive development by providing a contrived way for so-called developers to push high-density housing and commercial zoning in East Norman. These turnpikes will never pay for themselves, just like for the past 70 years. The OTA has never paid off a bond. Because of the shell game called cross-pledging, OTA is allowed to continue covering up the failed business model, all while swindling the Oklahoma citizens in perpetuity. But do you know what else is worse? The Oklahoma Turnpike Authority continues full steam ahead on these routes, even though the Supreme Court is likely to rule that they have no legislative authorization. These routes are illegal, and you are being lied to by the staff at the OTA. Why are you continuing to approve monies on routes that are going to be ruled illegal by the Supreme Court, a ruling that is final and not appealable? Is it because the clock is ticking on the current bond debt and your OTA staff says you need to move full steam ahead to get that money? Is this rush to build willful intent or lack of competence? OTA continues running business as usual, still operating in secrecy and paying their contractors for work on routes not even authorized. And yet, even as work defiantly continues to the point of right-of-way acquisition readiness, the OTA staff still refuses to acknowledge the number of properties that will be directly and indirectly impacted by these turnpikes. They still operate in the dark by providing incomplete open record requests. They have apparently never provided you, their oversight board, with complete, factual, timely, and transparent information so that you may make informed decisions, which is your job. Your board members claim they didn't even know about the Access program until Governor Stitt showed up on February 22nd to announce the Access program. Yet 1 month prior, your board approved Poe And Associates program management contract for close to $5 million with zero documentation of the scope of work or even the name of the project. And then you approved 12 more firms in February to the tune of $60 million to work on unexplained projects. And you claim that you had no idea what these projects entailed. So how does a board ethically vote on approving millions and millions of dollars when you have no idea what that money is going to be spent on? Is this continued secret behavior by the OTA leadership, willful intent, or lack of competence? And why is your board being complicit in this activity? The OTA continues business as usual by defying the court's order to rectify their willful violations of the state's Open Meeting Act. We are here the day after a long holiday break, watching the board, being asked yet again by people that are not telling you the truth. I hope you can see that they're not telling you the truth. They're asking you to rubber stamp a bunch of fiscally irresponsible agenda items and legally deficient resolutions that are somehow going to magically repair all the harm the OTA caused in by operating in secret. The resolution presented to you today for a vote is a manifesto in defiance. The OTA willfully broke the law by violating the Open Meetings Act and is poised to break the law again. Evidently, the OTA believes they are above the law, considering they have been allowed to operate above the law and without reproach for 70 years, as the OTA lawyers so brazenly announced at the Supreme Court hearings on multiple occasions. Is this willful intent or lack of competence? You voted on these agenda items found to be in willful violation of the Open Meetings Act. We, the people, stand here before you and ask you to take a pause on voting on any agenda items associated with the Access Oklahoma program or resolutions attempting to mitigate the Open Meetings Act violations so that you don't again find yourself in willful violation of the law. Please do your job for the people of Oklahoma. Thank you.
Next on the list is Mark Van Landingham.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Van Landingham, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Government Relations at the Oklahoma City Chamber. We appreciate the opportunity to comment today. With more than 3,000 members, our chamber is the largest economic development organization in the state. We have a long history of working with the leadership and staff of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority and private sector partners to facilitate economic development through strategic investment in our state's turnpike system. This cooperation has led to positive outcomes not only for the public, but also for increased commerce. Our Chamber's support for Access Oklahoma is included in our 2023 Public Policy Guide, which was approved by our Board of Directors in December. It is our desire that the plan continue to move forward in full compliance with the law, including the state's Open Meeting Act. Allowing Access Oklahoma to move forward is important for three critical reasons. One, enhancing safety on the turnpikes. Two, providing increased access to urban and rural communities throughout the state. And three, maintaining a transportation system that stays ahead of population growth and increased traffic in the metro areas. Oklahoma City features three major interstate highways. Completion of an outer loop will facilitate efficient access to all parts of the metro by providing an alternate route to an increasing amount of heavy freight loads. I'd like to again emphasize our support for Access Oklahoma moving forward in compliance with all applicable laws. In closing, I can tell you that I've been authorized by the State Chamber and the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce to state they are in full alignment with our Chamber's position on this issue. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Next on the list, Richard Labarth.
Chairman Love, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and other board members. It's fortuitous, perhaps, that I follow Mr. Van Landingham as a representative of the Oklahoma City Chamber. I'd like to point out that within the past week and a half or so, the Oklahoma City Chamber, through Mr. Roy Williams, its head, along with the representative of the State Chamber and the Tulsa Chamber, co-authored a letter to the editor of the Tulsa World. That letter is quite telling. Among other things, it recites an objectively provable falsehood, namely, as a point which they wish to make, which I presume was furnished to them by OTA staff. They represented that this turnpike going through Cleveland County is ostensibly warranted because they said that there are some 5 accidents per day along I-35 in this stretch from Purcell to the Tri-City connection point. In fact, that conflates, that exaggerates the true number by some 17 times. The true number, which is verifiably provable from ODOT data, which is publicly available, is 0.3 of one accident per day. So I'd like for you to allow that to sink in, because, and I'm certainly not accusing any member of this body as participating in a public misrepresentation, but through surrogates and through friends, and bear in mind that the Chamber's membership is populated by the very large engineering firms which stand to enjoy the benefit of the OTA's largesse in these projects. So they have a dog in the fight, and they're campaigning on behalf of their membership to no one's surprise. That's how politics works. I'm a big boy. I've been a lawyer since 1985, and I guess I can't blame them for that. But it would be nice if they would not articulate untrue points that, as I say, presumably are being furnished to them by OTA executive staff. I wish to bring home the point that we learned over the course of our lawsuit, the OMA case. One of our researchers did a deep dive and pulled up every single set of minutes from 2010 forward to mid-year this year. And what she determined was that there were 1,047 votes taken by this body. And of those 1,047 votes, only 3 of them included a dissent. And each of them included only a single dissent. And if I'm recalling correctly, it was actually Mr. Titsworth each time who did so. So that, without more, is suggestive that the board is perhaps all too willing to accept whatever is being represented to you all by the OTA executive staff. And that, if true, would be quite unfortunate. This is your chance. This is, we pray fervently that you will not take this action to approve all these payments. Of course, these payments, some almost 42 million have already been made, but nonetheless, it would not be good governance to try to ratify all these payments and provide a patina of legitimacy to them. And in fact, as Amy said just a few moments ago.
1 minute.
Thank you. The Supreme Court, this is sort of like the sword of Damocles. It's hanging over there. The Supreme Court hopefully is soon to rule. And if we go not only approving or blessing the 42 million already paid, but start embarking on further $102 million in payments, only to find in a month or 2 months or 3 months that the Supreme Court says, nix, sorry OTA, you lose, that would be a massive hemorrhaging of an incredible amount of money. So I urge you to pause, hit the pause button, and allow for open and honest discourse. Let the OTA make its case, why this is all necessary, and let the opponents make their case. And let's all do it in the light of day. That is my prayer, that is my request, that you all please strongly consider a moratorium and holding off on taking the action that the staff asks for you to take today. Thank you very much. Mr. Love.
Next on the list is Alexei Tarasov.
Chairman Love, members of the board, Secretary Gatz. My name is Alexei Tarasov, along with my co-counsel Richard Labard and Stan Ward. I'm one of the lawyers in the open meeting lawsuit. And on December the 28th of last year, Oklahoma District Judge Timothy Olson entered a final judgment in that case, stating in part as follows: the actions taken by the OTA board approving agenda items 884, 885, 894 in the January 25, 2022 regular board meeting are hereby invalidated. The actions taken by the OTA board approving agenda items 906, 908, and 909 in the February 28, 2022 regular board meeting are hereby invalidated. The invalidated items of business related to the OTA's board approval of contracts for the Access Oklahoma program. The court's judgment made it clear that the contracts awarded in violation of the Open Meeting Act are invalid. Item 894 was a program management contract with Poe And Associates, the so-called project number SP65, at a value of $4.96 million. Item 906, approved by the board, awarded an amount not to exceed $5 million to each of the 12 different engineering firms labeled Professional Design Services Contracts for Access Bond Program Engineering Division. Then item 908 provided for the approval of right-of-way management contracts and capital program to Poe And Associates for right-of-way management services, various turnpikes in a sum not to exceed $2 million. And finally, item 909, approved on February the 22nd, 2022, allowed utility management services contracts for the Access Bond Program for a sum not to exceed $2 million. The applicable statute, 25 Oklahoma Statute Section 313, and the cases that construe it, makes clear that all actions taken in willful violation of the Open Meeting Act are invalid, and such actions are tainted ab initio from the very start. Now, within only 2 days of the court's judgment on December the 30th, the OTA releases its agenda for today's meeting, and the agenda clearly evinces a design on the part of OTA to ratify the payments made pursuant to the contracts that the court has just declared to be invalid and void. If the vote on item 1026, which is the item that asks for ratification of the payments, if that vote results in the actual ratification of the payments, then I submit to you that our clients, plaintiffs in the case, will suffer harm in that the court's judgment that they just obtained would be effectively vitiated. Instead of compelling the engineering firms and the right-of-way contractors to disgorge millions of dollars of public funds that they've received pursuant to invalidated contracts, the OTA's proposed action not only eschews any obligation to pursue the recoupment of millions of dollars already paid out, but also it seeks to give away tens of millions of additional dollars that belong to the state for work that was commissioned in violation of the state's Sunshine Law.
1 minute.
The purpose of the OMA is to promote an informed citizenry. Our plaintiffs, our clients, as Oklahoma residents, have a vested interest in being informed as to the actions that the Oklahoma government undertakes and the payments it makes for services that are rendered to the state. Ratifying the payments made for the work to OTA's contractors as part of item 1026 would injure our clients and the Oklahoma public in 2 ways. First, it would render meaningless the court's judgment that we have just secured. And second, it would wholly defeat our clients and the Oklahoma public's statutorily protected interest in being informed as to the business transacted by the state government, and particularly the OTA. The OTA, as pointed out by my colleague, has already paid over $40 million under the contracts found to be invalid. I submit that the contracts at issue have already been declared invalid, and it would be illegitimate to now ratify the payments that are made pursuant to these illegal contracts.
Time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the list, James Bond.
The people I want to thank are you people right back here. I'll thank you guys too, allowing me to come up here today. I was educated at an OU up in Kansas called Autumn University. I was a biology student, and I took all the environmental classes we had, every single one of them. One of them was called Land Use Decision Making, Professor Roth. Professor Roth taught us in those days that nothing whatsoever was more important, more vital than our water. Our water. According to him, that is our most vital resource. And I think now we'll see it. Every day we hear on the Weather Channel, you know, about the drought stricken the whole country, not just Oklahoma, but the whole country's in drought. The idea of putting a turnpike or any major highway right through a watershed, I'm sure has Professor Roth rolling in his grave. Anybody, I can't think of why anyone in their right minds would think about even possibly jeopardizing one of the most valuable watersheds in the entire state. Why we would even consider putting our route here blows my mind, because that's exactly what it does. It puts this watershed in jeopardy. All it would take is one hazardous waste spill right there on the highway, and that watershed would be trashed for 1,000 years, according to some people. 1,000 years we wouldn't be able to use it. We've got ads on TV now, Camp Lejeune, the water at Camp Lejeune. We need to protect our water more than anything else. And they're not a turnpike, not a highway, not all the highways and turnpikes in Oklahoma amount to anything when compared to our water. All right, we need to protect that water more than anything. That's the main thing I had to say today. The other thing I had to say today is word on the street, word out there on the street of Noble and Norman and stuff. I asked Dr. Serrato today, have they looked at any of your alternative routes? And she said that these guys, Cole and them, haven't, as far as she knows. I wouldn't give any engineering firm any money that didn't know what transportation as a service phenomenon was. All right, and I asked all their engineers over and over again last year about, hey, what about the transportation as a service phenomenon? It's sweeping the world. Even according to the NPR, it's sweeping the world. None of them, not a single one of the engineers that I spoke to even knew what it was. This young man right there, though, said, I don't know what it is, but you come to the meeting next month? I said, yeah, I'll be there. And he said, I'll do a little checking on it. I'll find out. And his conclusion was, God bless you, that it's really not going to have an effect in Oklahoma. Well, that's bull. That's bull. And I think everybody here knows it. Forecasts are that in 2050, as much as 90% of the vehicles we see on the roads now won't be there anymore. What if that's the case? If you people are depending on money coming in for these highways for the next 70 years is what I see. I'm told we could set the sun on them and make them all freeways in 15 years if you guys would just do it now. But if you go through with what you want to do, that it'll be at least 70 years and you're counting on people more and more traffic. But what if the truth is, if this TAAS phenomenon is true, like they're saying, everywhere they're saying is true, it's sweeping the world, and it will come to Oklahoma. What if that's the truth, and 10 years from now, we only have half the number of cars on the road? What if they're right? Everybody's saying, oh, no, they're wrong, traffic's gonna increase. But already Amazon and Walmart and everybody's looking at ways to deliver things to our doors without us having to go out. Klaus Schwab already sits and says, you'll own nothing and be happy. You know, people don't want us owning cars. You guys want us owning cars, I'm sure.
1 minute.
Because you want us driving on Turnpike, paying tolls. I think it could be closed down. I've seen facts right now, or numbers that say that the Turnpike could all be turned into freeways in Oklahoma within 15 years if we do it right now. All right. The last thing I have to say is the word on the street in Noble is that the route is set so firmly where it is because insiders have lots of money to make along that route. All right. If that's the truth, you guys need to stand up and say, hey, we're going to do things different. Thank you.
Next on the list, Whitney Mullica.
Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Whitney Mullica, and I've lived in Oklahoma City my whole life. My house is not in the path of the proposed turnpike. For work, I help people who are on Medicare and Social Security, and I have clients who are millionaires, and I have clients who can barely afford the tolls to get to their doctor's appointments. I've never built a road, obviously, so I'm not qualified to talk about construction, but I did want to mention a couple things. As of this morning, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority had a 1.7 out of 5-star review on Google. 59 people have written reviews, and the average they gave this board of unelected members was 1.7 stars. I've spent a lot of my 20s in the restaurant industry, and I can promise you that if any of the establishments I had worked for received a 1.7, there would be an area manager ready to yell at the GM. And I worked at Mahogany downtown for a few years when they first opened, and we had a table reserved in the bar for bankers and oil executives and people who were in construction. And I recognize, one of our board members, but you probably, don't remember me because most people barely pay attention to the people who are serving them. As long as the service is at par, there's no real reason to pay attention. But that's why we're all here today. That's why people like myself who have nothing to do with construction have been showing up to these meetings. The service is not up to par. It's not even worth 2 stars. So we talked about perception a little bit when Dave spoke earlier, and I just want to tell you guys what I see when I look at these members. It's real estate developers, do-it construction engineers, steel manufacturers, lawyers, financial advisors, and people who own transportation companies. So which one of you is here to look out for the people? Politicians love to participate in ribbon cuttings, and they're great at what some people like to call the scoop and toss of financial responsibility. And that's essentially what this $5 billion plan looks like, a scoop of responsibility and accountability tossed to the future generations. And unfortunately for people who would like to identify as Republicans, the more recent Republican administrations have forgotten what property rights and the rule of law mean. So now both sides of our political system are on board with spending as much money as possible on whatever pork project they come up with next. And of course, Wall Street's on board, and the similarly situated individuals in the finance, insurance, and real estate industries are on board. These public-private partnerships make them a lot of money, and the relationship between the OTA and their stakeholders is essentially a transfer of risk. You're transferring the risk of construction and the risk of repayment. It's gambling with the public's infrastructure. There's around $4 trillion in outstanding municipal bond debt in America, and it makes me wonder if the bond market is really capable of protecting the communities from arrangements that extract wealth from the public to benefit private actors. Is that the job of our politicians, or is that the job of this board? We've seen what happens when these public-private partnerships fail in Indiana, Texas, and more recently in Puerto Rico. And in 2017, Tim Gatz was invited to Washington for Senator Jim Inhofe's subcommittee hearing on leveraging federal funding, innovative solutions for infrastructure. During this hearing, Inhofe said to a Democrat, It is funny, we are on the opposite sides of a lot of issues, but we are always together in friendship as well as in infrastructure. So while the public continues to vote on hot topic issues that really don't mean anything, the Democrats and Republicans are collectively riding a gravy train, which oftentimes centers around facilitating vehicular traffic. While in Washington, Gatz told the people present that Oklahoma carefully vets projects, they select an appropriate level of risk, and prepare structured financial plans, which are all paramount to success.
1 minute.
As we face a 15-year, $5 billion zombie project from the 1990s, I suppose purchasing domain names that could be used by the opposition prior to announcing access was part of the vetting process, and keeping the public in the dark, a willful violation of the Open Meetings Act, may have been part of the strategy of selecting appropriate risk. And as for a structured financial plan, if the OTA really has one, why is this board unwilling to submit to a special or investigative audit? According to the World Bank, macroeconomic crises like COVID-19 are an important reason behind private-public partnerships failing, and it makes me wonder if this access program might really just be an act of desperation and a mayday. The bottom line here is the people of Cleveland County have told you guys, we don't want to put your zombie project on life support. So thank you for letting me speak today.
Next speaker, Randy Carter.
All right. Good afternoon. It is afternoon, isn't it? Do we miss lunch? Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've got a couple of topics I'd like to talk about real quickly. You all remember March 29th, the board meeting that was held that day, and Dr. Amy Serrato got up and spoke quite eloquently about the impending projects. And after that, after her presentation in remarks at the end, Secretary Tim Gatz got up and spoke, and I'd just like to read to you from the transcript that we took of that video of that meeting. Secretary Gatz's word, I almost promoted you there. Secretary Gatz said, and these are his words, "First and foremost, I want to thank Dr. Serrato for coming and visiting with the board today. She brings information to us that we have to consider, and again, our engineering team. I hope that we can use Dr. Serrato as a resource and can you continue to keep the lines of communication with her. Because again, I think she brings expertise to the table and we need to pay attention to, and so I have a commitment to do that and continue those conversations." Well, I can produce for you a log from Amy Serrato's phone records that shows the number of times that she called the headquarters to set up an appointment to come in and visit with Secretary Gatz or anybody else on the Turnpike Authority to talk about these issues that they had a commitment to do. They stood before you and told you that they had a commitment to visit with her, to see her, to talk to her about these projects. Yet she never got a response. She never got a call back. She never got a meeting. Is that how the authority that comes to you with projects does their business? They make a commitment to you and yet can't follow through on it. Now, was that willful intent or was that lack of competence? We don't know. Either one of those spectrums doesn't bode well for an organization that comes to you, the board that is supposed to oversee this Turnpike Authority, asking you for billions and billions of dollars to produce these projects that, well, and let's talk about that. We've discovered, and we've done a lot of research, we've had a lot of people that have done a lot of research, we have discovered that throughout the history of the Turnpike Authority, I believe it's CDM Smith that's been doing it lately, makes projections of the revenues that will come through on the toll projects, on the new Turnpike projects. Well, we've discovered that throughout the history of the Turnpike Authority that those projections are only 63% accurate. Now, when I was in school, a 63 was an F. Now, from those projections, as I understand it, the bonds are rated and sold in order to be paid off from those toll revenues that are going to come through. But you're only going to generate 63% of what's able to pay those off. So there's not money there. It's a flawed operations model, and yet you continue to do it over and over and over again. As I understand it, we've seen the numbers from the Kickapoo, the most recent project. Those projections are drastically, geometrically less than what those projections were that you used to approve the issuance of bonds to pay off those turnpikes. That makes no operational sense. Financially, actually, one of the state representatives that I talked to mentioned the word Ponzi scheme. I don't know the exact definition of a Ponzi scheme, but it appears to me that this is being kicked down the road for generations to come. Now, I want to make a point, too, about that number of 63%. In one of the interim studies, I believe it was Representative Sterling.
1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute. Ooh, I better talk quick. I won't go to that. We know 63% is an accurate number. Like we said earlier, you guys have rubber stamped everything that they bring for you, from what I've seen, and that just doesn't make sense. You guys have already been adjudicated as willfully in violation of the Open Meetings Act based on information that the staff of the Turnpike Authority has brought to you. Now, if I was sitting in one of your seats, and actually I have some similar experience. I've served as Assistant Chief Commissioner of the Oklahoma Insurance Department, and occasionally I would go for the commissioner and sit in one of those seats on various boards. And I would be concerned. There's the possibility of a criminal prosecution based on willful violation of the Open Meetings Act. I don't mean that as a threat, but If I was sitting in one of those seats, I'd be wishing I had brown pants on.
Time.
Thank you.
Next on the list, Linda Berry.
Hi, thank you, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. I hope you hear some of the things that have been said. I don't have a prepared speech. I've lived in Norman for 37 years. I'm 63 years old. I've lived in this state my entire life. I live in a home with a family. I have a community. The city of Norman, which is the third largest city in this state, and in Cleveland County. Both my local city government and the county government have asked you to stop and have dialogue and discussions and hear what our concerns are. One of the most important things to me that I've noticed, and I'm going to read a document, part of a document from the City of Norman website. It's called the Lake Thunderbird Watershed. If you haven't taken time to look at what laws and things have been passed in our community to protect that watershed, I urge you to do that, please, before you make any decisions. What is a watershed? Before we dive into the Lake Thunderbird watershed, let's discuss what a watershed actually is. A watershed is an area of land that catches and drains water into a creek, stream, or lake. Everyone lives, works, and plays in the watershed. This means that everything we do has the potential to affect our water quality. We're talking about our drinking water here. It's very important to all of us. One comment I did hear made earlier was that the Chamber of Commerce of Oklahoma City, which represents the people of Oklahoma City, and the Chamber of Commerce of Tulsa, which represents the people that live in the city of Tulsa, are for these turnpikes and support what you're doing. None of them get their water from our water supply. Lake Thunderbird and its watershed supply drinking water to the city of Norman, the city of Del City, and the city of Midwest City. That, to me, is something, and I think that was mentioned earlier too, really needs to be looked at hard and seriously with concern before decisions are made. And I have not seen that done yet. I'd like to yield the rest of my time to anyone else that was up behind me. Thank you.
Next on the list is Darren Smith. And we do have 5 minutes left of our hour. Darren Smith is who? Oh, he's not here. Excuse me. Douglas Keith Bellis.
Well, first of all, thank you for listening to all of us. About everything I wanted to say, but probably already been said. I do want to say that myself and my wife live about a third of the mile east of the where the turnpike's supposed to come through, close to where they're planning to have a big clover leaf right next to Lake Thunderbird. We're on the east side towards the lake. I first of all want to tell you that this is just smacks of government overreach. That's the one thing that we've heard several people say. You realize we're one of the only states, if not the only state, that the Turnpike Authority does not have to work with a local community. I mean, you have a city of Norman that's voted 5-0 from a city council position, and you're not interesting. They've had planning because of the watershed issues we've talked about. We live on top of the Garber sandstone, which I'm a geologist, by the way, and that water provides water from Edmond to Yukon to Norman. Most of the wells are close by us. It's just, and it seems to have no concern to anybody whatsoever. But I'd say one of the things that hasn't been mentioned since I lived there, I'm a geologist. I've worked in northern Oklahoma City for 30 years, and I've commuted every day to the route that right up from where I'm at, which would be halfway down the South Connector. And as it stands, if it was built today, I could still commute faster taking the roads that I've got. It absolutely is not an answer to anything for Oklahoma City traffic. If you just pull your phone up 5:30 any afternoon or 7:30 in the morning and you look where all all the traffic is. So all these north-south roads, especially downtown Oklahoma City down to Moore, and on the east side by I-35. So say you're coming south, and you want to get out of that traffic, and you're coming down I-35. Are you going to turn and go east on I-40 and drive almost to Shawnee to get on a road that takes you all the way down to Purcell just to get around the traffic in the next 6 miles down to Moore? Or swing back around and come into Moore from the south side? I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, if somebody had a map and just looked at a map, I just ask you for a second to look at a map, and I make maps for a living, a third grader can look at this and go, this is ridiculous. And the time that it takes to drive up there proves it. So that's one of my main things. So you've got something that doesn't make any sense to start with from a driving situation. And to me, that's one of the number one things. To build this route and to do this over the top of a city that has already planned for the water situation for years without even talking to them is just an unbelievable thing to do. To usurp their authority is just it's just unheard of. And I will just tell you that the mental stress that the people in our community has felt looking at this, everybody out there is torn up by it. And that's probably the primary thing. The one thing I do think that almost anybody in Oklahoma, you've had 14 turnpikes altogether, 3 of them that are economic. The Turner, obviously, is important to Oklahoma. Why wouldn't you just limit this to fixing the Turner and get that done? In fact, I think that'd be the smartest thing you do. Forget all these controversial ones that are no value, and concentrating and getting that one finished. It'll get you out all the rest of this hassle, because we will continue to fight you the best we can.
1 minute.
Thank you. And it would make sense, and I think all of Oklahoma could get behind fixing the Turner and laying off these spurious turnpikes that have proved to be uneconomic everywhere else except for that. When I was a kid, 10 years old, riding with my grandparents in the car, they bragged to me about how Turner Turnpike would be paid off in 15 years and then it'd be public usable for everybody in the state. Here we are, I'm 67 now, and we are looking at this ongoing turnpikes. We've got another, 10 or 15 they've got outlined in different places. This is ridiculous. They're out of control. They need to be shut down, and they need to be finishing up the Turner and getting their ducks in order, and we need to turn as many things as we can into something that's public that everybody can use. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of our public comments. I appreciate you staying professional and appreciate the decorum.